Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather forecast brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, it's the end of a month, and I want to just take a look back at what the month of May gave us. So our first map, one of my favorite ones to show you here, shows precipitation ranks by climate district for the month of May. Now we look across parts of North Carolina and Virginia, and what we really see here is that the farther west you go, the wetter things were. So you can see when we look at the 130-year rank, we see a lot more of these numbers down here in the 20s and 30s, even some in the teens, which would represent, very wet conditions at times. But if you look across the rest of the country, I want to point a few things out. The Pacific jet entered the United States almost right here in southern Oregon, and at times it just ejected here into the northern plains. In fact, this is one of the big reasons why last night again we saw a lot of severe weather in this area. When you just step back though and see the impacts of this, here in the upper Midwest, the northern plains, planting delays have been just ongoing through the month of May due to repeated shots at some colder weather and then the very wet weather. Meanwhile, to the south of where that jet stream comes in like this, things have been very dry. And while we've beat back some of the drought in the central plains, it still remains, and it's kind of lurking there with the potential to redevelop and push into the Corn Belt going forward. Now, the reason why I'm talking mostly about drought here and not so much over parts of the Mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas is because we're not yet getting strong signals as to the risk of drought developing in this part of the country. I'm specifically talking here. So we just need to keep this whole map in mind moving into a new month. And before we go any further, let's talk about temperatures. So the month of May was very cold in the Pacific Northwest. Record-breaking, in fact, whereas from Southern California to Texas into lower Mississippi River Valley, quite warm. Now, across North Carolina, we were pretty close to average with a little bit warmer bias over toward the East Coast. And that is also the area that you saw in the previous image was drier. If we just look at the latest drought monitor, you can see, this was released last Thursday, you can see this is an area now where there's some concern that drought conditions could continue. But we have something brewing right now that could possibly impact this in a big way. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But first, I want to make sure you all know about a resource I recently built. So I'm just going to go to a new tab here, and I'm going to open up my website. It's agweather.com. And when you go to that website, that's ag-wx.com, you can come over here to this drop-down menu and pluck out a city. Now, many of you have probably used this before, but I've made some updates here. I want to talk about Wilmington. So I started typing in Wilm, W-I-L-M, and notice it pulled it up. Click on it, click Submit. That number 180 represents its rank, by the way. It's just my index system. It'll take you to this site where you can click here and get a forecast for Wilmington. It pulls up all the current conditions, the rainfall forecast. Now look at this. This is what I wanted to point out. Over the next 7 days, between all of our forecast models, the possibility of getting as little as 1/4 inch, but as much as over 4 inches is possible. And that's what I want to discuss with you. But one of the great things about this site is not only get these little cards that tell you the weather over the next 7 days, but it also shows you down here at the bottom, and it takes about 10 seconds to generate these maps. So they'll show up blank initially, but then they'll be there. But it shows you down the bottom all of the different forecast models, when they're bringing in precipitation and all that kind of stuff. But I want to take you all the way to the bottom, because down here at the bottom, in fact, let's just get another quick refresh and update this page. There we go. Should be there. There they are. Down at the bottom, I have some important graphics, this being one of them. Year-to-date precipitation for Wilmington. Notice, we are drier than the climatological average. We're currently at almost 72% of normal, all right? So we've had some drier weather, and that's why the drought monitor is starting to show that. On the temperature side of it, we've only had brief durations of colder weather. Mostly this spring, we've had above average temperatures. And you can also take a look at the GDU graph. So we are above average on GDUs, and since April 30th, we picked up 680 of them. That gray there in the background is the 20-year GDD range. So I hope you find this tool quite useful, and hope you all make good use of it. But what in the world is giving us? Let's go back there. This large range in in precipitation. Well, it all has to do with what's going on in the tropics right now. So we saw on Memorial Day Hurricane Agatha come into this part of Mexico. And right now the National Hurricane Center, as of 8 a.m. this morning here on Tuesday, May 31st, has given this a 60% chance of developing. And that's where the trick is going to lie. As it develops, where does it track? Now, to be honest, I would want the European model solution, not so much for Florida, but if we do take the track of this potential system somewhere through here, coastal regions in South Carolina and North Carolina could pick up some rain, which they do need. So I want to show you the model differences right away before I get into the long range today. This is what the European model, the 0Z, came up with. So we're going to watch several moving things. One, big storm system moving through the Canadian prairie is going to have this lingering front here. It doesn't get to us for a while. Okay, this is 7 a.m. Wednesday, going out there to Thursday, getting into Friday morning. That's when the front that last night produced all the severe weather here is finally looking quite broken up. It's going to be toward our area. Now, at the same time, this is when the tropical system could be emerging and heading toward Florida. So let's go through from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Friday afternoon into Friday evening. Now, you start to see the storms firing up on that front, possibly by Friday evening. I say possibly because we're pretty far out and the timing is quite difficult to pick up on. But the European model wants to take this system, this tropical system, and doesn't have it really get shoved out to shore by the front, but instead keeps it quite close along the shore. This is 7 a.m. Saturday. Going into Saturday night, going and there into Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon and evening, you can see that the would-be tropical system, and we do not know yet the strength of this and where it will be. You're looking at a single operational model run. Could bring the outer rain bands, which means we would get the precipitation but not the extreme winds if the position of this is right, which could help with our drought situation here. This is the best possible scenario. It keeps all the nasty parts of this tropical system away from the coast, but gives us the beneficial rain. And then you see out here into Monday and Tuesday, it spins off to open ocean, and there's yet another slow-moving front by next Tuesday coming toward us. Now, what this means in total is that if we just take this back and look at it, we got to wait till the end of the week before we get a chance for some showers and storms. And it's not as though it's bringing in a lot. In fact, let's take a look at this. We'll go to the European model. We'll look at the whole of the country here. We'll just slide forward total accumulated precipitation. So through Friday morning, let's just take you all the way there, we're not seeing any precipitation really, save the occasional pop-up storm that comes out on the heat. But then as we go into the weekend, this is now through Friday night, that's when the chance of storms comes through here. Again, pretty fragile forecast. It's all about the timing of that front, but this is what I've got here on Tuesday morning to share with you. And then we see that the model is attempting to bring the storm system right here, which could add some precipitation into this area. Now, where's all this uncertainty come from? Well, it comes from the fact that other models aren't doing that. For example, over the next 7 days, the GFS takes whatever develops and keeps it here. Notice how dry it is keeping this area. So we kind of hang here on a bit of a precipice of could be and could not be, depending on the rain. And no, we just don't fully know this yet. I'm going to give you some more indicators in a few seconds, but that's it. Now, why is this tropical system there? Well, in the month of May, the MJO jumped out over the Indian Ocean, came north of Australia, swept into the Western Pacific, came back out into the Western Pacific, and today sits in phase 7. Now, you know that I talk on and on about the MJO because it is one of our more dominant tropical teleconnections. What I want you to be keeping in mind is, through our hurricane season, keeping the MJO here in phases 7, 8, and 1 often leads to better rising motion here. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you get rising motion showing up in this part of the world, in the Caribbean, in the Gulf of Mexico, this is a great upper indicator in the upper levels that we're kind of taking the cap off of things, letting tropical systems to develop. So we need to be very wary this year of that happening. Now, you know that this upcoming hurricane season, as forecast by the Tropical Cyclone Group out of Colorado State, they're looking at 19 named systems, averages somewhere between 14 and 15. So we've already shared this with you, and NOAA just a couple weeks ago updated their 2022 hurricane season, saying 14 to 21 storms, very similar to Colorado State. They've also given it a 65% chance of being above normal. Last year, by the way, it was a 60% chance of being above normal, so they're going more aggressively after this. If we just think about all of that and the reason why, I'm going to open up a new map here. Let's go to the latest sea surface temperature anomaly map, because this is where a lot of this story I think is really going to be told when we think about why the forecast is so much above normal. You see, there is a La Nina going on right now, and that La Nina, of course, influences the wind shear pattern across the open Atlantic Ocean. So if we come back to those SSTs, we see two things. The cooler water here is indicative of stronger trade winds in this area, and the warmer ocean temperatures here are conducive to development, but the wind shear will likely be lower. And that's one of the big reasons why so many of these forecast groups are calling for an above average hurricane season. They're also seeing a lot of tropical convection on the Sahel, which is what often gives birth to these tropical systems. Now, as we look out over the time period of June 10 to July the 10th, what I watch for in terms of tropical activity in addition to the ocean temperatures is where the models are putting the subtropical high. Now, this map isn't a whole lot to look at, is it? Just a few contour lines. But what I see here is that the models are attempting to keep the Bermuda high east. Now, what's important about that is that means that the trade winds will likely be doing something like that. It's if this Bermuda high sits over the top here that we really change up the hurricane season. We're just not seeing that early, but it's very, very early in the season right now. So let's instead shift our attention over to the forecast for precipitation during the time period of June 10 to July 10. There could possibly be in this corridor quite a bit of thunderstorm activity. The models are activating a really strong, there's some really strong indications of a southwestern monsoon, and they're attempting to place the ridge axis here. So the flow comes in and over like this. Now, I have a lot of questions about this, especially given the pattern over the next 10 to 15 days. Do we really start to build in drought into the cotton belt, the hardwood winter wheat belt, and the western corn belt as we go forward? Because in the near term, this is not the case in this area. We're drier actually over by us in North Carolina. So I got a lot of questions about where this is and where this is going. But this is the latest outlook. Let's zoom in a little bit more. So we're going to watch this area for the potential for drought development, but at this stage, there are no indications of it from the eastern corn belt all the way to the mid-Atlantic. All right. Given that, what are we looking at again over the next week? We've taken a look at the model runs. Let's just put it together. European model, taking that tropical system here. Outside of that, much of North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, getting back into Tennessee, Kentucky, we're not going to see a lot of precipitation. In fact, the whole of the southeast is drier. There will be pop-up storms. That is just, we're in that time of year. There will be pop-up storms in this, but no major precipitation, as I stated, until Friday. That'll be over here in the southeast part of North Carolina. And this is consistent with the GFS. Remember, the GFS has taken that would-be tropical system here. So look at this. Look at the difference if you were in Florida. The GFS, bone dry. The European, 4+ inches of rainfall. So this is what happens this time of year as these tropical systems come in. We can look at this another way. This is the chance at getting an inch of rain over the next 10 days. So our chances are best along the coast with the tropical system and the stalled out front on Friday. But into the interior, we don't have a high chance. But I do want to show you chance of getting more than 2 inches of rain. This is where we were worried about drought, and it sure seems like the first 10 days of the month are going to beat back or kind of kick the can down the road on drought development in the western corn belt here. Something to think about. And just to take a look at this, by day 10, what's the cause for that? This long and extended jet stream coming from the Himalayas all the way to the coast of Oregon. So what happens is that we get these troughs in the Gulf of Alaska. They push through the northern tier of the United States. The pattern stays active, and you even get into week 2, wetter than normal conditions into this area. So that's what your week 2 forecast looks like. So we've now looked in the near term and long term in precipitation. Let's talk temperatures. Because since the beginning of April, notice the GDD deficits we've seen in parts of the Midwest, the Northwest, and the Northern Plains. Some places here are 150 to 200 GDUs behind normal, whereas to the south of that line, especially in Texas, we're way above average. Across North Carolina, we're just generally sitting right near our normals. in terms of GDU accumulation. We're above average farther to the south and closer to average farther to the north. So we can't look at this and say we've seen major deviations from normal in the rate at which we've accumulated those GDUs. So just want to point that out here. Where are our temperatures going this week? Well, Tuesday's a pretty warm one for us. Same with Wednesday. But as we progress toward the end of the week, you can see the front advancing. It's going to be quite cold down here in parts of Texas, at least compared to average. And the colder air with the front arrives on Friday. So about a 10-degree temperature drop in Raleigh. Saturday into Sunday, those are cooler days. We could get the cloud cover from the outer kind of edge of that tropical system, keeping us on the cooler side of things. As we go forward, though, day 5 through 10 looks like this. Near normal temperatures for us in day 10 through 15. The cooler weather stays in the Midwest. We see above average temperatures. So do you see that same split? All right, the greatest heat, I'm watching out for California mid-month. That's something we really need to keep our eye on. And the last thing I'd like to show you today is this. Where do we go through the rest of June into July? Well, this is starting off mid-June, so this is the third week of June, the 14th through the 21st, and this is a 1-week sliding window. Notice how the models attempt to pull the heat back into the central United States going into the first 2 weeks of July. Not our region, but here. This is, again, I've got a lot of question marks on this, and we need to see something happen to the Pacific Jet to get things to change over. Okay, we've got to stop it from being so zonal and strong from the Himalayas to Oregon in order for this to occur. So we'll need to keep a very close eye on how the month of June and July shape up here for the midsection of the United States versus the East Coast. I will keep you posted and talk to you again next week. Thanks.